No doctor could soothe the crying billionaire's son until a black maid walked in and shocked him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The private hospital was unusually quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos happening in one of its elite wards. On the plush white leather couch, billionaire Richard White sat, his fingers gripping the armrest so tightly his knuckles turned white. His face was a mask of helplessness as he watched his son, Charlie, a young boy no older than 8, thrashing in agony. The boy's fever had spiked earlier that morning, and despite the best doctors the money could buy, Charlie's cries only grew louder with each passing minute. Why won't he stop? Richard's voice broke as he looked up at the nurse standing by the door. We've tried everything, Mr. White, the nurse replied softly, her voice tinged with concern. We've administered the medication, but nothing seems to be working. I think we need to consider other options. Richard clenched his jaw. His mind raced with the thought that his wealth and influence couldn't even save his son. What do you suggest? He asked, desperation creeping into his tone. The nurse hesitated for a moment. Perhaps it's time to try something unconventional. As the words hung in the air, the door to the room opened slowly. A woman entered, her presence almost unnoticed at first. She was dressed simply in the uniform of a maid, her hands clasped in front of her as she stood quietly at the edge of the room. Her name was Maya, a woman of humble means, hired to clean the billionaire's home. She had never been invited into the hospital wing before. Yet, here she was, walking in with a calmness that contrasted sharply with the panic in the room. Without a word, she walked toward Charlie, who was still sobbing uncontrollably. The doctors had been baffled, the nurses unsure, but Maya's heart was certain. She kneeled beside the boy, her gaze softening as she whispered something that no one else had thought to try. It's okay, little one, she murmured, her voice gentle and steady. You're safe now. Richard watched in stunned silence, his confusion turning into curiosity as Maya placed a hand on Charlie's trembling arm. The boy's cries started to subside. Slowly, the frantic tears began to stop as his body relaxed. Richard couldn't believe his eyes. He looked at Maya, a sense of awe and disbelief washing over him. How could a maid, someone he had never really paid attention to, have such an effect on his son? Was it magic? Or something more? This moment, Richard realized, would change everything. Maya's touch wasn't just calming. It was healing something deeper within the boy. As the room fell silent, all eyes turned to Richard, waiting for him to react. This was no ordinary maid. Something extraordinary was happening before his eyes. Richard sat frozen, his mind reeling as Maya continued to kneel beside Charlie, her hand still resting gently on his arm. The room, once filled with the sounds of the boy's heart-wrenching sobs, had fallen into an eerie silence. It was as if time had stopped. Richard could hardly believe what he was witnessing. After hours of futile medical intervention, after so many attempts to soothe his son, it was Maya, his maid, someone he had only ever considered for her cleaning skills, who had finally calmed the child. Charlie's breaths grew steadier, and his small body, once rigid with pain, slowly relaxed under her touch. For a moment, Richard thought he might be dreaming. How was this possible? How could someone like her do what no doctor or expert had been able to? The question lingered in his mind as he watched Maya continue to comfort the boy, speaking softly to him in a language of reassurance. You're safe now. Everything will be all right, she whispered, her voice calm and unwavering. Richard's gaze moved from Maya to Charlie, who had finally stopped crying. His eyes were still red, and his body trembled slightly, but the worst of the storm had passed. Maya's presence, her soothing words, had worked when nothing else had. Richard cleared his throat, trying to shake off the overwhelming emotions that had begun to rise within him. He stepped forward cautiously, unsure of how to approach this unexpected turn of events. How did you know what to do? He asked, his voice thick with both disbelief and gratitude. Maya didn't immediately answer. She simply smiled, a soft, humble expression that didn't boast or seek recognition. Sometimes, she said quietly, all it takes is being there. The simplicity of her words hit Richard harder than he expected. It was as if she had reached into the very heart of the situation and understood it in a way no one else had. She had been here for Charlie when everyone else had been focused on the wrong things: treatments, medications, doctors, and machines. But Maya had simply been present, offering something far more valuable than any of those things: a moment of peace, of understanding, of comfort. Richard's eyes softened as he looked at Maya. He had never thought much about her, except to give instructions for her work or brief her on household tasks. But now, in this moment, he realized that Maya was far more than just a maid. She was a person who had the rare ability to connect with his son in a way that no one else could. As he processed everything, he felt a sudden pang of guilt. Why had he been so quick to overlook her, to assume she was nothing more than a servant in his home? She had just done something that no one else had been able to do. She had reached his son when no one else could. Richard turned his attention back to Charlie, whose breathing had slowed to a calm rhythm. He was no longer crying, no longer writhing in pain. He was resting, something Richard hadn't seen him do in hours. The sight filled him with both relief and awe. "Thank you," Richard said quietly, his voice rough. Maya simply nodded, her expression still soft. She wasn't seeking praise or acknowledgement. She had simply done what felt right. But Richard couldn't help but feel that there was so much more to Maya than he had ever imagined. The thought lingered in his mind as he watched Charlie sleep soundly, a peacefulness that had been absent for far too long. The warmth that had come with Maya's presence seemed to fill the room, slowly replacing the tension and fear that had hung in the air just moments before. As the minutes ticked by, Richard felt a shift inside himself. It was as though Maya's simple act of kindness, her gentle touch, had cracked open something in him. The walls he had carefully built around his heart, walls constructed from years of wealth, power, and pride, were beginning to crumble. For the first time in a long while, Richard found himself questioning what really mattered. It wasn't the money, the prestige, or the success. It was moments like this, the quiet, unexpected moments that changed everything. As he stood there, watching Maya with his son, a realization washed over him. His life, his family, could be so much more than the cold, empty world he had created. There was something warmer, something more human, that he had been missing all along. And it was Maya, this woman from a world so different from his own, who had shown him that. Richard took a deep breath and stepped closer to her, his heart swelling with newfound respect. "I want to thank you again," he said, his voice steadier now. "You've done something no one else could. I don't know how to repay you for this." Maya gave him a small, knowing smile. "You don't need to repay me," she replied softly. "You've already done enough by letting me help." Her words hung in the air, simple yet profound. Richard stood there for a moment longer, looking at the two most important people in his life, his son, who was finally at peace, and the woman who had made it all possible. In that moment, he knew something had changed. Something deep inside him had shifted. The walls around his heart had come down, and for the first time, he truly saw Maya, not as a maid, not as someone beneath him, but as a person who had the power to heal. He felt a new sense of gratitude for her quiet strength, her compassion, and her ability to touch lives in ways he had never imagined. "I did not expect this." Richard White stood by the window of his mansion, his eyes fixed on the sprawling city below, but his mind was far away. It had been days since Charlie had finally fallen asleep without the constant fear and pain that had gripped him. The doctors had given their assurances, but it was Maya, the woman he had once seen as just a maid, who had truly brought peace to his son. The thought of her lingered in his mind, stirring something unfamiliar within him. The idea that this woman, with so little to her name, could do something that no amount of wealth had been able to achieve left him unsettled. That night, after Charlie had finally slept soundly, Richard found himself staring at the door to the guest quarters where Maya had stayed. It was late, and the house was quiet, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something needed to be said, something needed to change. He made his way down the hallway, his footsteps muffled on the plush carpet, and paused at the door. He hesitated, unsure of what to do. He had never been the type to show vulnerability, especially not to someone in her position. He had always been the one with control, the one with the answers. Yet, here he was, contemplating knocking on a maid's door, wondering what he might say. Maya had changed everything in such a short time. Richard knocked softly, the sound almost swallowed by the stillness of the house. Moments later, the door creaked open. Maya stood in front of him, her expression calm, as always. There was no hint of surprise, no confusion, just that same quiet grace that she had carried with her since the moment they met. "Mr. White," she asked, her voice steady. "Is everything all right?" Richard opened his mouth to speak, but the words didn't come right away. He stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say, feeling a strange mix of gratitude, admiration, and confusion. "I wanted to thank you," he said finally, his voice softer than he had intended. Maya blinked, but didn't say anything. Instead, she stepped aside and gestured for him to come in. "Please, come in," she offered. Richard hesitated, but then walked into the room. It was modest, the furnishings simple and practical, yet there was something peaceful about it. Maya closed the door quietly behind him. She stood at the foot of the bed, waiting, her eyes not questioning his presence, but simply acknowledging it. Richard's gaze flickered toward the small, worn photograph on the dresser, an image of a family, smiling in front of a modest home. Something about it tugged at him, and for the first time, he noticed the subtle details of her life that had always gone unnoticed before. The simple frame, the small items that spoke volumes about her past. "I don't know how you did it," Richard said, his voice tight with emotion. "You saved him. You saved Charlie when no one else could." "I don't understand how." Maya remained quiet for a long moment, her gaze steady but thoughtful. "I didn't save him, Mr. White," she replied, her voice soft. "I just helped him find peace. That's all anyone really needs, isn't it?" Richard swallowed hard. There was something in her words that resonated deeply with him. Peace. It had been so long since he had thought about what it meant to truly feel at peace. He had spent his entire life chasing success, building an empire, but all of it had come at the cost of his own peace of mind. And now, here she was, a woman who had nothing compared to his vast fortune, yet she had given his son what no amount of money or power ever had. Richard glanced at the photograph again, his heart aching with a realization he hadn't expected. Maya wasn't just the maid. She wasn't just a woman who cleaned his house and took care of his son. She was something far more, someone who had a power he had never fully understood. A power to heal, to offer comfort, to remind him that it wasn't about what he had, but what he could give. For the first time in his life, Richard felt the weight of his wealth and status and realized how hollow they truly were. Maya had reminded him that what really mattered, what truly made a difference, was the simple act of caring, of being there for someone when they needed it most. He could feel the walls he had so carefully built around himself starting to crumble. "Maya," he said, his voice breaking slightly. She turned to look at him, her expression unreadable, but he could see the flicker of something in her eyes, a quiet understanding, as if she knew what he was about to say. "I don't know how to thank you," Richard continued, his voice thick. "For everything. For what you've done for Charlie, for what you've done for me. I'm not sure I even deserve it." Maya didn't speak right away. She just walked over to the small chair by the window and sat down, her hands resting in her lap. Richard took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. "You've changed my life," he whispered, more to himself than to her. She didn't answer immediately, but when she did, her voice was calm and steady. "I didn't do it for you, Mr. White," she said softly. "I did it because it was right. We all deserve to be seen, to be heard. And sometimes, all it takes is one person to remind us of that." Richard stood still, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time in a long time, he felt a stirring of something inside him that he hadn't felt in years. A spark of hope, a spark of humanity. He knew in that moment that Maya was no ordinary person. She was a reminder of everything he had forgotten. The humanity he had lost in his pursuit of power. The connection he had long since abandoned. And just like that, he realized that the real change wasn't in Charlie, though that was part of it. The real change was in him. And it was all because of a woman who had nothing but compassion to give. I stood in front of the large oak door, my heart beating faster than it ever had in my life. What had happened in the past few days, the change in Charlie, the transformation that Maya had brought, was still a blur. I had never expected to be here, never expected that this woman, this maid, this humble soul, would shake the very foundation of my life. And yet, here I was, standing at the threshold of something I could no longer ignore. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me, the decisions I had to make. Maya had given me more than I ever thought possible. She had reminded me of what was truly important in life: human connection, kindness, and love. All things that had slipped through my grasp as I became obsessed with wealth, power, and success. But now, I was about to do something I had never done before: reach out in vulnerability and truth. The door creaked open, and there stood Maya, looking just as calm and composed as she always did. But there was something different in her eyes. A quiet understanding. A calm that settled over me as soon as she looked at me. I was no longer the wealthy, powerful man who demanded respect. I was just a man, a father, a person who had finally seen the light. "Mr. White," she said, her voice steady, but there was a warmth in it now. "Is everything all right?" I couldn't answer at first. I just stood there, watching her, taking in the woman who had changed everything for me. "Maya," I began, my voice unsteady. I don't know how to thank you. For everything. For what you did for Charlie. For what you've done for me." Maya tilted her head slightly, her eyes softening, as if she understood the weight of what I was trying to say without needing further explanation. "You don't need to thank me," she replied simply. "I did what anyone would have done. What was right." I shook my head, still not fully able to grasp the magnitude of what she had done. "No," I insisted, stepping closer to her. "It's more than that. You healed my son when no one else could. You gave him peace when all the wealth in the world couldn't. You gave me something I've been missing for so long. You gave me perspective." Maya remained silent for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "it's the simplest things that can make the biggest difference. It's not about wealth or status. It's about being there, really being there for someone when they need it the most." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. The truth in them was undeniable, and I felt my walls start to crumble. Everything I had built, every business, every deal, every achievement, had been done with the goal of finding fulfillment. But I had been chasing the wrong thing. And Maya, with her simple wisdom, had opened my eyes to that truth. For the first time in a long time, I realized that the answer wasn't in the boardroom or in the numbers on a screen. The answer was in the people we care for, the connections we make, and the kindness we show. I looked at Maya again, my gratitude swelling inside of me. "You've shown me a whole new world," I whispered, almost to myself. "And I've been blind to it for so long." Maya smiled, but there was no pride in her expression. There was just a quiet understanding, as if she had always known the way things would turn out. "I didn't show you anything," she said softly. "You've always had it within you. You just needed to be reminded." I stepped forward, feeling a strange sense of peace settling over me. "Maya, I don't know how to explain this, but I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay. I want you to be a part of this family. A real part of it, not just someone who cleans and serves." She looked at me, her eyes wide with surprise, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in her gaze. "You mean that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do," I said firmly. "I don't know what it is about you, but I feel like I've found something I've been searching for my whole life. And I want to learn from you. I want to change. I want to be the kind of father Charlie deserves. The kind of man who sees what truly matters." Maya was silent for a long time, and for a moment, I feared I had overstepped, that she would refuse me. But then, she nodded. "I'll stay," she said softly. "I will. But only if you truly want to change. Not just for Charlie, but for yourself. Because change has to come from within, Mr. White. And it's a long road." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, and I nodded in agreement. "I'm ready," I said, my voice full of conviction. "I'm ready to walk that road." And so, as I stood there, with Maya's quiet strength beside me, I knew that everything had changed. The path ahead would be difficult, but it was one I was willing to walk. With Maya's guidance, I would rediscover the things that truly mattered: family, compassion, and the ability to be present for the people I loved. As the days passed, I watched as Maya helped Charlie grow stronger, helped him rebuild the trust he had lost in the world. She taught him what it meant to be brave, to be kind, and to find peace within himself. And in the process, she helped me rebuild my own heart, teaching me that there is no greater wealth than the ability to truly care for others. I no longer cared about the empire I had built. All that mattered now was the family I was finally learning to cherish. I stood at the large dining room table, watching Charlie and Maya. Across the room, The light from the chandelier above bathed the room in a warm glow, casting long shadows along the polished oak floors. For the first time in what felt like forever, the house felt full, not with the noise of work or the hum of business meetings, but with laughter, with life. Charlie, once so distant and shut off, was now engaged, laughing at something Maya had said. It was a sound Richard had almost forgotten existed in his home, a sound of genuine joy. Maya had brought him back to life. Not just Charlie, but Richard too. After everything that had happened, Richard had found himself questioning everything. His priorities, his lifestyle, his relationships. The truth was, he had spent so many years buried in the world of money, power, and status that he had forgotten how to simply be a person, how to connect, how to feel. But Maya, with her simple compassion, had shown him what really mattered. And now, things were starting to shift. In the weeks since Maya had arrived, Richard had become a different man. He'd started spending more time with Charlie, talking with him, listening to him. They'd begun doing small things together, things that Richard had never made time for before. The sound of Charlie's laughter was a reminder of what he'd been missing all these years. He'd started taking an active role in his son's life, not just as a provider, but as a father. But there was something else, something deeper, that Richard had been struggling to face. Maya's presence had changed everything. She had become an anchor in his life, someone who grounded him when he felt lost, someone who reminded him of the humanity that he had almost lost. It was impossible to deny the connection that was growing between them. Richard couldn't help but wonder if she felt it too. He had thought about it for days now. He had tried to push the thought aside, but it kept coming back. What was this pull he felt toward her? Was it gratitude, admiration, or something more? Maya was still in the kitchen, preparing lunch, her presence filling the house with a sense of calm. Richard watched her for a moment, her hands moving gracefully as she worked. He felt a tug in his chest, an emotion he couldn't quite place. For the first time in his life, he felt vulnerable. Maya had shown him what it meant to care for someone, to truly care for someone. But now, he was starting to wonder if he could let go of his walls completely. Could he open up to her? Could he let her in, beyond the walls he had built around his heart? He wasn't sure. But one thing was clear, he wanted to try. He walked over to the kitchen, where Maya was arranging the food on the counter. She turned when she heard his footsteps, her smile warm and inviting. "Lunch is ready," she said, her voice soft and steady, as always. Richard stood there for a moment, just looking at her, taking in the woman who had transformed his world. "Maya," he said, his voice catching in his throat. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About how much you've helped me and Charlie. About everything you've done for us. And I want you to know that I'm grateful. More than you could ever know." Maya's smile softened, but she said nothing. Instead, she nodded, as if she understood what he was trying to say without needing any more words. But Richard could feel the weight of his emotions growing. He had to say it. "I don't just mean in the way you've helped Charlie," he continued, his voice quiet but steady. "You've helped me too. You've made me realize so much. I've been living my life all wrong, focusing on the wrong things. I've been too blind to see what really matters, what's truly important." He paused, taking a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "And now, I'm starting to realize that it's not about wealth or success or any of that. It's about people. It's about love. It's about being present for those who need you." Maya's expression softened, but she didn't interrupt. She simply stood there, listening, her eyes filled with understanding. Richard took a step closer to her, the distance between them closing, but there was still a hesitation in his movement, a fear of what would happen next. "I want to thank you for everything," he said again, his voice thick with emotion. "You've changed my life. You've changed Charlie's life. And I don't know how to repay you for that." Maya shook her head gently, her eyes warm. "You don't have to repay me, Mr. White," she said softly. "I'm just doing what feels right." Richard's heart beat faster. He wanted to say more, to let her know just how much she had come to mean to him, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he simply nodded. There was a long pause between them, a stillness that hung in the air. Finally, Maya spoke again, her voice low. "You don't have to have all the answers right away," she said. "We all have our own journey to take. But it's never too late to start. You're already on the right path." Richard looked at her, her words sinking deep into his heart. He knew she was right. This was just the beginning. There was still so much work to do, so much to change. But with Maya's guidance, he finally felt like he was on the right track. He reached out then, slowly, his hand trembling slightly as he touched hers. She didn't pull away. She simply held his gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. And in that moment, Richard knew. This was just the start of something new. Something better. Something real. He smiled, feeling a sense of peace he had not known in years. "Thank you, Maya," he whispered, his voice filled with sincerity. "For everything." She smiled back, her eyes soft and knowing. "It's my pleasure," she replied. "I'm just glad to see you both finding your way." And as they stood there, together, Richard realized that he was finally starting to live the life he had always wanted. The life that had been waiting for him all along. I could feel the weight of the changes in my life, each moment more profound than the last. The house, once a sterile mansion filled with nothing but silence and the hum of technology, now felt alive. Charlie was smiling more, his laughter echoing through the halls. But more than that, there was a change in me. I was becoming the father I had always wanted to be, the man I had never allowed myself to be. But even with all the progress, there was something else gnawing at me. A question that had been lurking in the back of my mind since Maya had come into our lives. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Could I allow her to truly be a part of our family? Not just as a caretaker, not just as a maid, but as someone who had fundamentally changed us both? My thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Maya entered without waiting for a response, as she always did, her presence bringing a calm that seemed to settle the entire room. "Everything all right?" she asked, her voice steady and calm. Yet there was an underlying concern that I knew she wouldn't voice unless she truly cared. I looked at her, at the woman who had completely shifted the course of my life. The woman who had saved my son, and in many ways, had saved me. "Maya," I began, my voice softer than usual. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About how much you've done for us, and about how much you've changed things." She gave me a small smile, a quiet acknowledgement of my words, but she said nothing. Instead, she walked over to the couch where Charlie was sitting, playing with his toys. She crouched down beside him, her hand gently resting on his shoulder as she spoke to him in a soft voice, encouraging him as she always did. It was so simple, so natural. She wasn't just looking after him. She was nurturing him, guiding him in a way I hadn't been able to. It made me realize that this wasn't just about what she had done for us. It was about who she was. She had always been the calm in the storm, the steady presence we never knew we needed. I watched her interact with Charlie, her kindness and patience clear in every movement. And then it hit me. I had been wrong all along. I had viewed her as someone who was only meant to serve, someone who didn't belong in the same space as me. But in reality, it was her presence that had been the glue holding everything together. I could no longer deny it. I needed her here, not as a maid, but as a part of our lives, as a part of our family. The thought was both terrifying and liberating. "Maya," I said again, more determined this time. She turned toward me, her calm gaze meeting mine. "I want to ask you something." She nodded, her expression open and patient. "I want you to stay here. For good. I want you to be a part of this family, not just as someone who works for us, but as someone who belongs here, who is valued here." I could see the shock in her eyes, but she didn't say anything right away. Instead, she simply nodded slowly, as if processing the weight of my words. "I've never asked you to do anything for me," I continued, my voice thick with emotion. "But I've realized something important. You've changed us. You've changed me, and I don't want you to leave." She stood there, silent for a moment, and I could feel the tension in the air. Then, she spoke. "I never thought I'd hear those words from you, Mr. White," she said quietly, her voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and something else I couldn't quite place. "But I've seen the change in you. I've seen the change in Charlie. And that's enough for me." She walked toward me then, her gaze steady. She wasn't angry. She wasn't upset. She was just accepting. Accepting the fact that this was a shift, not just in her life, but in all of ours. "I'll stay," she said, her voice full of quiet determination. "But only if you truly mean it. Only if you're ready for the changes that come with it." I nodded, my heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and relief. "I'm ready," I said, feeling the truth of those words. Maya had not just brought peace to Charlie. She had brought peace to me. She had opened my eyes to a life that was richer than any amount of money or success could offer. A life that was filled with love, connection, and understanding. Maya didn't just heal my son. She had healed me in ways I never thought possible. And I knew, in that moment, that I was willing to do whatever it took to protect that. To protect her. To protect this family. Over the next few weeks, we began to settle into a new rhythm. Charlie was thriving under Maya's care, and I was spending more time with him, guiding him, being the father I had always wanted to be. Maya, however, was no longer just a caretaker. She was becoming an integral part of our lives, a steady force that kept us grounded. I found myself looking to her for advice, for comfort, for support. And every time I did, she was there. It wasn't long before Charlie started calling her mom, a simple word that carried so much weight. Richard had initially hesitated to let that happen, unsure of what it would mean. But when he saw the way Maya responded, the tenderness in her voice, the care in her eyes, he realized that it was natural. It was right. Maya had become the mother figure that Charlie needed, the one who had been absent from his life for far too long. As I watched the two of them interact, something deep within me shifted. I knew that we had all found something special here. Maya had helped me reconnect with my son, but more than that, she had helped me reconnect with my own heart. She had shown me the power of love, the importance of being there for those who need you, and most importantly, she had shown me what it meant to truly care. I had everything I could ever want: wealth, success, power, but none of it meant anything without the love of my family. And Maya had reminded me of that. I was ready to give her the place she deserved in this family. I was ready to build something real. Together. I was sitting at my desk late one evening, reviewing some documents that had been piling up all week, when a soft knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I looked up to see Maya standing in the doorway, her expression calm, but there was something different in her eyes, something that told me she had something important to say. "Mr. White," she began, her voice steady as always, but there was a quiet urgency in it now. "There's something I need to talk to you about." I set the papers down on my desk, giving her my full attention. "What's going on, Maya?" I asked, my voice reflecting the concern that I was feeling. She stepped into the room, closing the door gently behind her. "I've been thinking a lot about how things have changed in the past few weeks," she said, her gaze meeting mine with a seriousness I wasn't used to seeing from her. "About everything. About you, about Charlie, and about me being here." I raised an eyebrow, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "What do you mean?" Maya took a deep breath before continuing. "I think it's time for me to move on." Her words hit me harder than I expected, and for a moment, I couldn't process them. "What? Maya, what do you mean by move on?" My voice was a mix of confusion and disbelief. "I mean, I've been thinking a lot about the role I play in your life, in Charlie's life, and what my purpose is here," she explained, her eyes never leaving mine. "I've helped Charlie, I've helped you, but now I feel like maybe it's time for me to go back to my own life. I can't keep being the person who fixes everything. It's not fair to you or to me." I was speechless. This wasn't the conversation I had expected. Maya had been the one constant in our lives, the one person who had changed everything for the better. And now, she was telling me that she was going to leave? "You can't leave," I said, my voice filled with an emotion I hadn't expected to feel. "You've been the one to bring us back together. You've been the one to heal what was broken. You can't just leave." Maya's face softened, and she stepped closer to me. "I know you're grateful, and I'm grateful too. But sometimes, the people we help need to learn how to stand on their own. I've taught you and Charlie what I can. Now it's time for you to take that and move forward without me." She paused for a moment, her gaze never leaving mine. "And it's time for me to figure out what I want for myself. I can't keep being someone who fixes things for other people. I need to live my own life." I stood up from my desk, walking over to her. "You can't just leave. You're part of this family now," I said, my voice desperate. "You've been the one to help Charlie, to help me. You've been the one to remind me of everything I've lost, everything I need to gain." Maya took a deep breath, her expression still calm, but there was a sadness in her eyes that I had never seen before. "I've done what I needed to do, Richard. I've helped you both more than I ever thought I could. But I can't stay forever. I need to find my own way, just like you found yours. You're stronger now. You and Charlie. You don't need me to fix things anymore." I was silent for a long time, my mind racing. I had always thought of Maya as a constant in our lives, someone who was there to guide us, to be the steady hand when things fell apart. And now, she was telling me that she was ready to leave? The thought of her not being there felt like a punch to the gut. I don't know what to do without you, I admitted, my voice thick. You've made everything better. I don't want to lose that. Maya's expression softened, and she stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. You won't lose it, she said gently. You've learned what you needed to learn. You know what's important now. You'll be okay. You and Charlie will be okay. I could feel the weight of her words, but it didn't make it any easier to let her go. But I don't want you to leave, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Maya smiled softly, the kind of smile that reached her eyes. I know, she said, but sometimes the hardest thing we have to do is let go. You've changed. You're no longer the man you were when I first came here. You've learned how to be a father, how to be a man, how to love. And I'm proud of you for that. But I need to find my own path now. She paused for a moment, then added, and who knows? Maybe we'll cross paths again someday. But for now, this is what I need. I stood there, unsure of what to say. The idea of her leaving felt impossible, but I knew she was right. She had helped me become the person I needed to be. She had helped Charlie become the boy he was meant to be. And it was time for both of us to continue our journeys without her. Thank you, I said, my voice filled with emotion. For everything. For changing our lives. For reminding me of what really matters. Maya smiled, a small, bittersweet smile. You don't need to thank me, Richard. Just keep going. Keep growing. Keep loving. With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, watching her go. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. Maya had changed us. And in the end, that was all that mattered. I watched as Maya walked out of the room, her figure disappearing down the long hallway. My heart felt heavy in a way I hadn't expected. For days, I had known she was planning to leave. I had known that her time in our lives was limited, but I hadn't realized just how much I had come to depend on her, to rely on her presence, until now. I stood in the silence of the room, the space around me feeling colder than it ever had before. She was gone, and I had to face the reality of what that meant. The house, which had once echoed with the sound of laughter and warmth, now felt like a cavern, empty and hollow. Charlie, unaware of the shift that had just occurred, was still in the living room, playing with his toys. I could hear his soft giggles, his joy still untainted, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something had been taken away. Something important. Maya had been the glue that held everything together. It wasn't just the care she had given to Charlie. It was the way she had brought us back from the brink. She had reminded us of what it meant to care for one another, to love each other unconditionally, and to be present in each moment. And now she was gone. I couldn't help but wonder if this was what it felt like to lose someone who had become more than just a part of your life. She had become family. I walked slowly to the window, my gaze lingering on the quiet street outside. The world outside seemed unchanged, as though nothing had happened. But everything had changed. I had changed. Charlie had changed. Maya had made sure of that. And now, I had to face life without her. I wasn't sure I was ready for that. But I had to be. I had no choice. I had to continue the journey she had helped me begin. I turned back to see Charlie sitting on the floor, his toys scattered around him. He looked up at me, his big eyes filled with curiosity. He didn't fully understand what had happened, but he sensed the shift. I could see it in his face. He wasn't used to seeing me this quiet, this distant. Dad, he said softly, his voice breaking the silence. Where's Maya? The question hit me harder than I expected. I knelt down beside him, my heart aching at the innocence in his voice. She had to go, buddy, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Charlie's brow furrowed, and for a moment, I wondered if he fully understood. But then he reached out and took my hand, his small fingers grasping mine with surprising strength. Will she come back? He asked, his voice so soft I could barely hear it. I didn't know how to answer him. I didn't know if she would come back. Part of me wanted to believe that she would, that somehow, she would walk back into our lives just like she had before. But I couldn't make that promise. Not to Charlie. Not to myself. I don't know, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But what I do know is that Maya will always be a part of our lives. She helped us. She showed us how to be a family. And that's something we'll always have. Charlie seemed to accept that answer, at least for now. He smiled up at me, the light in his eyes never fully dimming, but I could see the question still lingering in his gaze. Okay, Dad, he said, his voice filled with a quiet understanding beyond his years. I sat down beside him, pulling him into a gentle hug. As I held him, I realized something I hadn't fully understood until this moment. Maya hadn't just fixed Charlie. She had fixed me, too. She had shown me how to be a father, how to love my son, and how to be present in his life. She had taught me that being there, truly being there, was the most important thing I could do. I had spent so many years trying to buy my way out of my problems, trying to control everything, thinking that power and wealth were the answers. But they weren't. The answers had always been right in front of me. It was in the simple moments with Charlie, the quiet moments with Maya, that I had learned what it really meant to be alive, to be human. And now, even though she was gone, I knew that I had to continue the journey on my own. For Charlie, for Maya, for me. I took a deep breath and stood up, helping Charlie to his feet. "Come on, buddy," I said, wiping away the last of the sadness that lingered in my eyes. "Let's go get some ice cream." Charlie's face lit up, the joy returning to his eyes as he ran ahead of me. As I followed him, I realized that Maya had given me something that no amount of money could ever buy. She had given me my family back. And no matter where life took us from here, that was something I would always carry with me. I stood there, watching Charlie as he ran ahead of me, his small figure darting across the driveway. The sun had just begun to set, casting an orange glow over the estate. For the first time in what felt like years, everything seemed normal. The chaos, the tension, the fear, all of it had been replaced by something else. Peace. But beneath that peace, a storm was brewing. A storm I couldn't ignore. The truth was, I was scared. Not of the unknown, not of what lay ahead, but of what I had learned about myself. Maya had done more than just help us get through the tough times. She had changed me. She had shown me what it meant to be a father, to be human. But now, with her gone, the question I had been avoiding for so long loomed over me. Could I really change? Could I live up to the man I was becoming? Or was I just fooling myself? Charlie stopped running and turned to look at me, his face filled with joy. He didn't see the weight I was carrying. He didn't see the uncertainty in my heart. But it was there, and it was heavy. I walked over to him and knelt down, placing a hand on his shoulder. He smiled up at me, his eyes full of excitement, but I could see the question in them. The same question he had asked me days ago. Where was Maya? "We're going to see her soon, okay?" I said softly. "She's gone for now, but she'll always be in our hearts." Charlie nodded, though I could tell he didn't fully understand. How could he? He was just a child, and Maya had become such an integral part of his life in such a short time. He had no way of knowing that she was never really gone. The lessons she had taught him, the love she had shown him, would stay with him forever. "Can we go to the park?" Charlie asked, his face lighting up with a bright smile. I chuckled and ruffled his hair. "Of course. Let's go." As we walked to the park, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Not just with Maya's departure, but within myself. For the first time, I was fully present in Charlie's life. I wasn't distracted by work, by the pressure of being the perfect businessman. I wasn't thinking about the next deal or the next big thing. I was here, and that felt right. The park was just a few blocks away, and as we walked, Charlie skipped ahead, his laughter ringing out in the evening air. I couldn't help but smile at the sound. It was so pure, so innocent. A sound that reminded me of everything I had almost lost. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be times when I would slip back into old habits, when the pressures of my life would threaten to pull me away from what mattered most. But for the first time, I felt ready to fight those temptations. Ready to do what I had to do to keep my family together. To keep Charlie's laughter echoing in the halls of this house. To keep the peace Maya had given us. When we arrived at the park, I sat on the bench and watched as Charlie ran around, playing with the other children. I was content in a way I hadn't been in a long time. The world felt right, the air felt fresh, and for the first time in years, I was at peace with myself. As I watched Charlie, I thought about the future. I didn't know what it held, but I knew one thing for sure. I would be there for him. I would be the father he deserved. And I would be the man Maya had shown me I could be. In the days that followed, life returned to a new kind of normal. Charlie continued to grow and thrive, and I worked hard to stay present in his life. I spent less time in the office, less time obsessing over the next big business move, and more time doing the small things, reading with him, playing games, taking walks in the park. I was learning to be a father, and more importantly, I was learning to be a man. Maya's absence was felt deeply, but in some ways, it brought us closer. I saw the way she had shaped us, even in her absence. The lessons she had instilled in me and in Charlie were now a part of who we were. And for that, I would always be grateful. The changes were slow, but they were happening. And that was enough for me. I didn't need to have all the answers. I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to keep moving forward, one day at a time. One step at a time. And as I sat there, watching Charlie laugh and play, I knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter for us. A chapter where love, understanding, and presence were the driving forces. A chapter where we didn't just survive, but thrived. And it was a chapter that I would cherish every day, no matter what came next. I had not expected to be here. The past few months had been a whirlwind of change, of growth, and of healing. But now, as I sat in the middle of the living room, the warmth of the fire flickering in front of me, I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Maya had helped me build something beautiful, something that I could never have imagined before. But I was still afraid. The uncertainty of what the future held loomed over me like a shadow, and I couldn't help but wonder if I was truly ready for what was to come next. The house had changed. The empty spaces that once felt like a reminder of my isolation now felt full. Full of memories, full of love, full of possibility. Charlie, my son, had transformed before my eyes. He was no longer the quiet, withdrawn boy he had once been. He was vibrant, full of life, and more importantly, he had started trusting me again. It was a slow process, but the bond between us had begun to grow stronger day by day. But there was still that nagging feeling deep inside of me. Could I keep this up? Could I continue to be the father Charlie needed, the man I had promised myself I would be? Or was I fooling myself into thinking that I could change after all these years? The question lingered in my mind as I stared at the fire, the flames dancing in front of me, casting fleeting shadows on the walls. Maya had made me realize so many things. She had made me see that what mattered most wasn't the money I had or the success I had achieved. What mattered was love. What mattered was connection. What mattered was being there for the people you cared about. And I had started to live by those values. I had spent so many years building a life that was empty of meaning. I had been focused on the wrong things, letting the pursuit of wealth and power dictate every decision I made. But Maya had shown me that the real wealth in life came from the people we loved, from the connections we forged, and from the impact we had on others. It had taken her leaving for me to truly understand that. And now, as I sat there, I knew that it was time to take what I had learned and move forward. I had to keep growing, keep evolving. For Charlie, for myself, and for the future we were building together. The sound of footsteps interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see Charlie walking toward me, his small face illuminated by the soft glow of the firelight. "Dad?" he said, his voice soft but full of curiosity. I smiled at him, the warmth spreading in my chest. "What's up, buddy?" I asked, patting the seat next to me. Charlie climbed onto the couch and snuggled up beside me, resting his head on my shoulder. "I was thinking about what you said," he began. "About Maya, and how she showed us how to be a family." I nodded, my heart swelling at the memory. "Yeah," I said softly. "She taught us a lot. She showed us what really matters." "Do you think we'll ever see her again?" Charlie asked, his voice full of innocence. The question caught me off guard, and for a moment, I wasn't sure how to answer. I had promised Charlie that Maya would always be in our hearts, but I wasn't sure if I could promise anything more. The truth was, I didn't know if she would ever come back. I didn't know if our paths would cross again. But one thing was certain. Maya had given us everything we needed. She had given us the tools to build a new life, a better life, and it was up to us to carry that forward. "I don't know, buddy," I said finally, my voice soft. "But what I do know is that she's always going to be with us. In our hearts. In the way we live our lives." Charlie nodded, his eyes wide and thoughtful. I could tell he was processing the idea, and for a moment, I felt a surge of pride for how far he had come. He was so much more than the scared, quiet child he had once been. "I think I understand," he said slowly. "It's kind of like a memory. You know, like when we think about happy things. They stay with us, even if they're not here anymore." His words hit me hard. He was right. Maya's presence, the lessons she had taught us, would never leave. They would stay with us in the way we lived, in the way we treated each other, in the way we loved. "Exactly," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "You're really smart, you know that." Charlie smiled up at me, his eyes bright. "I learned from you, Dad." His words were simple, but they hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been so focused on trying to teach him everything I thought he needed to know, but in reality, he had been teaching me all along. I had spent so much time looking for answers outside of myself, but the real answers had always been right in front of me. In Charlie's eyes, in Maya's kindness, in the way we all connected with each other. I wrapped my arm around him, pulling him closer. "I'm proud of you, Charlie," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "You've come so far." Charlie snuggled into my side, content. "I'm glad we're a family now," he said softly. "Me too," I replied, my heart full. As we sat there, the fire flickering in front of us, I knew that this was just the beginning. We had started something beautiful, something that Maya had helped us build. And no matter what the future held, we would always carry the lessons she had taught us. We were a family now, and nothing would ever change that. I had never felt more uncertain in my life. The house, once full of the hum of business calls and endless meetings, now felt like a place of healing. But even healing could not erase the weight of the choices I had made. Charlie was happier, and that was all I ever wanted for him. I was spending more time with him, trying to be the father he needed me to be. But there was still a question in my mind that I couldn't escape. Could I keep it up? Could I continue this new way of life without slipping back into the person I had been? As I watched Charlie play in the garden, his laughter filling the air, I realized that I had become so accustomed to running from my own feelings, from my own past, that now I wasn't sure what to do with the man I had become. I had made changes, yes, but change wasn't something that happened overnight. Change took work, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to give up everything I had once held dear. But in the silence of the moment, the answer came to me. I wasn't alone in this. I had people who cared about me. I had Charlie, and in a way, I had Maya too. Even though she was gone, the lessons she had taught us remained in our hearts, guiding us, shaping us. And that was something I couldn't ignore. I needed to make the decision now. I couldn't let fear drive my actions any longer. I had to trust myself, trust the changes I had made, and trust that I was on the right path. The next few days passed in a blur, with Charlie and I settling into our new routine. There were moments of joy, moments of doubt, but overall, it felt like we were finally becoming the family we were meant to be. Still, in the back of my mind, I knew I needed to confront the past. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of the man I used to be. I had to face the mistakes I had made, the decisions that had brought me here. And that meant confronting the people I had hurt along the way. One evening, after dinner, I sat down at the desk in my study, staring at the pile of letters and messages that had accumulated over the past few months. Business inquiries, personal letters, but one envelope caught my eye. It was from an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My heart pounded as I opened it. The letter was brief, just a few lines, but it was enough to send a shockwave through me. The letter was from David, a former business partner, and it was clear he wanted to make amends. It was a letter of forgiveness, a letter that acknowledged the past, the things that had gone wrong, and the ways we had both been hurt. I had never expected this. I had spent years trying to bury the mistakes I had made, trying to forget the people I had left behind. But here, in this letter, was the opportunity for something more, the chance to make things right. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone, my hands trembling slightly as I dialed the number I hadn't dialed in years. It rang a few times before David answered. "Richard," he said, his voice familiar yet distant. "I didn't expect to hear from you." I swallowed hard. "I got your letter," I said, my voice quiet. "And I think it's time for us to talk." There was a pause on the other end of the line before David spoke again. "I'm glad to hear that," he said, his tone softer now. "I've been waiting for you to reach out. There's a lot to say, Richard, but I think it's time we both stop running from the past." And so we talked, the two of us. For hours, we shared the things we had never said to each other, the things we had buried deep within ourselves. The resentment, the hurt, the regrets. But more than that, we talked about forgiveness. We talked about moving forward, not as business partners, but as two people who had been lost and found again. By the time the call ended, I felt lighter than I had in years. I had confronted the past, faced the mistakes I had made, and found a way to move forward. And with that, I knew I was ready to truly begin again. The following days were filled with new beginnings. Charlie and I continued our new routine, and I kept working on being the father I needed to be. But the most important change was in me. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was here, present in my life, ready to face whatever came next. One evening, as I was sitting in the living room, watching Charlie play, I felt a shift. It wasn't a dramatic moment, but it was one that I had been waiting for. I finally felt at peace. I wasn't perfect, but I was real, and that was enough. I didn't need to be the man I once thought I had to be. I just needed to be the man I was becoming. A father, a friend, a person who could love and be loved in return. And that, I realized, was what Maya had given us. She had shown us the way, and now it was up to us to walk it. Charlie ran up to me. His face lit up with excitement. "Dad, can we go to the park tomorrow?" he asked. I smiled and nodded, taking his hand. "Of course, buddy. We'll go tomorrow." As we walked out into the night, I looked up at the stars, feeling a sense of calm that had eluded me for so long. This was just the beginning, and I was ready for it. I had thought that after all the hard work, the changes, the conversations, that things would start to settle, that I would be able to enjoy the peace that had started to take root in our lives. But just as soon as I started to believe that we had found our way, that we had reached the calm after the storm, something unexpected happened. It was a phone call, a call that would change everything once again. I was sitting in my study, going through some paperwork, when the phone rang. I looked at the screen, seeing a name I hadn't seen in years. David. My heart skipped a beat. David was an old business partner, a man I had once considered a friend, but our relationship had ended badly years ago. It was a time I didn't like to revisit. He had been part of the business deals that had taken me to the top, but also part of the mistakes that had led me down the wrong path. We hadn't spoken since the fallout, and I had always thought that the chapter was closed. But here he was, calling me out of the blue. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello." My voice was cautious, unsure of what to expect. "Richard, it's been a long time." David's voice came through the phone, sounding older, tired, but with a hint of the same confidence I remembered. "I know this is unexpected, but I need to talk to you. It's about everything." I felt a knot form in my stomach. I had no idea what he wanted, but I knew that whatever it wasn't going to be easy. "What is it, David?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral, despite the rising tension inside me. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I know we left things badly," David continued, his voice softening. "But I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of reflecting, and I realized that I've never truly apologized for how everything went down. For the way I treated you. For the way I treated your family." The words hit me harder than I expected. I had never really expected an apology from him, especially not one that came so many years later. I was silent for a moment, trying to process what he had just said. "I've changed, Richard," he went on, his voice now filled with a sincerity I hadn't heard before. "I've made a lot of mistakes, and I know I can't undo what happened, but I want to make things right, if you'll let me." I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. The past few years had been a journey of healing, not just for me, but for everyone in my life. Maya had shown me the importance of forgiveness, of letting go of the past so that we could move forward. But now, standing here, I realized that I had been holding on to something I hadn't even realized was still there. The bitterness, the anger, the hurt from those old wounds. It had been festering, hidden beneath the surface, and I hadn't let it go. Until now. "David, I don't know what to say," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I didn't expect this. I didn't think you would ever reach out. After everything that happened, I thought that chapter was closed for good." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before David spoke again. "I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'm asking you for a chance to make amends, to start over. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to be better. For you, for your family, for me." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something. Hope, maybe. Hope that we could both finally move on from the mistakes that had defined so much of our past. "I'm willing to listen, David," I said, my voice steady now. "But it's going to take time. I can't just forget everything that happened. It's not that simple." He nodded, though I knew he couldn't see me. "I understand. I'm not asking for your forgiveness right away, but I hope that someday we can rebuild what was broken." We talked for a little while longer, discussing the past, the mistakes, the lessons learned, but we both knew that this conversation was just the beginning. We had a long road ahead of us, one that would require time, patience, and trust. But as the conversation came to a close, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time, I wasn't holding on to the anger and bitterness that had defined my relationship with David. I was ready to let go. "I'll be in touch," David said, his voice calm. "Take care, Richard." "You too," I replied, hanging up the phone. I sat back in my chair, letting out a long breath. The weight of the past had been lifted, but I knew that there was still work to be done. I wasn't sure what the future would hold for David and me, but I was willing to take that first step, to move forward. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly moving forward. I looked out the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The future was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let the past hold me back any longer. I had a new life now, a life with Charlie, a life with the lessons Maya had taught me. And I was ready to embrace it, fully and completely. I sat at my desk, staring at the phone in my hand, the recent conversation with David still echoing in my mind. It had been a long time since I had felt this unsettled, but there was something about the idea of reconnecting, of trying to rebuild the broken bridge between us, that stirred a deep sense of unease. The past was something I had tried so hard to leave behind, and now it was knocking at my door once again. I leaned back in my chair, running my hands over my face. I had thought that by making peace with myself, by learning to be the father Charlie needed, I had left the old life behind. But now, here it was again, like a ghost from the past, waiting to pull me back in. The phone rang again, snapping me out of my thoughts. This time, it was a call I had been expecting. I picked up the phone without looking at the caller ID. "Hello." My voice was rough, a bit more tense than I had intended. "Richard, it's David," came the voice on the other end. I didn't need to be reminded who it was. I had just spoken to him, but somehow, it felt different this time. "I've been thinking," David continued, his voice measured. "I know we've talked about moving forward, but I need to tell you something. Something I should have said years ago." My heart rate quickened. I didn't know what to expect. "What is it?" I asked, bracing myself for whatever was about to come. There was a long pause on the other end, and I could hear the sound of David taking a deep breath. "I've been doing some digging," he said, his tone serious. "And I found out some things. Things about your business. About the past." A knot formed in my stomach. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my mind racing. "Richard, I don't think you've realized how deep this goes," he said, his voice almost conspiratorial. "The mess we were in, the things we covered up, the lies we told." I stood up abruptly, the phone still pressed to my ear. My thoughts were spinning. The past had always been a shadow, lurking in the background, but now it seemed that shadow was becoming something much more real. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice tight. "I don't want to drag you into this more than I already have, but it's important," David continued. "There are things we didn't account for, and I think we need to deal with them now before they come back to haunt both of us." I swallowed hard. My chest tightened. I had spent so long burying those memories, trying to ignore them, trying to move forward. But it seemed that they were not going to be ignored any longer. "What are you asking me to do?" I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. David was silent for a moment before he spoke again. "We need to fix what we broke. We need to clean up the mess we made, together." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I closed my eyes, trying to think clearly. This wasn't something I wanted to do. It wasn't something I had ever wanted to face again. But there was no denying it. David was right. If I wanted to truly move forward, if I wanted to continue this new life I had started with Charlie, then I had to face the consequences of my past. I couldn't keep running from it. "Okay," I said finally, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I'll do it. But we're doing this my way. We're cleaning this up, and then we're moving on." David let out a breath of relief. "I'm glad to hear that, Richard. I knew you'd come around." I wasn't sure if he could hear the hesitation in my voice, but I meant it. I knew this was the only way. "We'll talk more tomorrow," David said. "I'll send over everything I've found. We'll figure this out." The call ended, and I stood there, still holding the phone. My mind was racing. I knew that this was a step I had to take, but I wasn't sure how to handle what was coming next. I had spent so long burying the past, and now it was coming to the surface, threatening to undo everything I had worked so hard for. I walked over to the window, staring out at the city lights. I could see Charlie playing in the yard below, his carefree laughter drifting up to me. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. I couldn't let this ruin everything. I couldn't let my past mistakes take away the one thing that mattered most, my family. Charlie needed me. I needed to do this for him. I needed to fix what I had broken so that we could move forward together. The next few days were filled with meetings, phone calls, and endless hours of paperwork. David had sent me everything he had found, and the truth was worse than I had imagined. There were financial discrepancies, questionable business practices, and a string of lies that I had told myself to justify my actions. But I couldn't afford to dwell on the past. Not anymore. I had to focus on the present, on Charlie, on the family I was building. And as difficult as it was, I knew I had to fix this. It wasn't just about the business. It was about my integrity, my future, and my ability to look my son in the eye without feeling ashamed. I spent hours going through the documents, making phone calls to the people involved, and slowly but surely, I began to clean up the mess I had created. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I wanted to give up, when the weight of the past felt like too much to bear. But I kept going. For Charlie. For myself. For us. And as the days passed, I started to feel a shift. The weight was lifting. The shadows of my past were starting to fade, replaced by something brighter. I had faced my demons, and I was finally ready to move on. The past was still there, but it no longer had the power to control me. I had taken responsibility for my actions, and I had done what needed to be done. And in that moment, I knew that we were ready for whatever came next. I sat in my office, the weight of the past few weeks pressing heavily on my shoulders. It had been an exhausting journey, facing the consequences of my mistakes, confronting people I had tried to avoid, and untangling the mess I had created. But as difficult as it had been, it was nothing compared to the moment I was about to face. I knew that David had not been completely honest with me. There had been things left unsaid, things that I had only begun to understand. The truth about the business, about my past, and about the people I had worked with. Those things were only the surface. Beneath all of it, there was something deeper, something more personal, something that I had been blind to for far too long. I had spent years burying my emotions, pushing away the people who cared about me, and hiding behind my wealth and success. But now, as I sat here, I knew that I couldn't hide anymore. It was time to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen and saw the name I had been avoiding. It was David. I hesitated for a moment, but I knew I couldn't keep running. I answered the call, my voice steady but tinged with apprehension. Richard, David's voice came through the phone, his tone familiar, but this time there was something different about it. There was an edge, a tension, something I hadn't heard before. We need to talk. About what? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. About everything, he replied. About what's been happening. About the things we've never talked about. I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew where this was going. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about the past, the things that had haunted us both. I'm listening, I said, bracing myself for what was coming. I've been thinking a lot, David began, his voice slow, careful. And I think it's time you knew the truth. The whole truth. I leaned forward, gripping the phone tighter. What truth? The truth about how everything went down, he said. The truth about why everything fell apart. My heart was pounding now. I had been trying to move forward, to leave the past behind, but it seemed like it was still catching up with me. What do you mean? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There were things we didn't plan for, things we didn't anticipate, David continued. I know you think I've been honest with you, but there's more. There's a bigger picture here that we've both missed. I closed my eyes, trying to process his words. What's the bigger picture, David? I asked, my voice tight. The truth is, David said, his voice quieter now, we've both been running from something. From the mistakes we made. From the things we never fixed. I didn't just leave you out of the business, Richard. I left you out of something much deeper. Something that's been eating away at both of us. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had spent so many years blaming everyone else for my problems, for the failures in my life. But now, David was telling me that I was just as responsible for what had happened. I had been running from my own mistakes, from my own demons. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm talking about the lies, Richard, David said. The things we covered up. The choices we made that we thought no one would ever find out. But they did. And now, we're facing the consequences. I was silent for a moment, trying to absorb what he had just said. What do we do now? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. We fix it, David said. We fix what we can, and we learn to live with the rest. But we can't keep pretending like nothing happened. We have to face it, Richard. We have to make things right, even if it's hard. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle in. For so long, I had tried to ignore the truth, to run from it, but now, I had no choice but to face it. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about my life. My future. Okay, I said, finally finding my voice. We'll fix it. But I can't do this alone. We need to face this together. We will, David replied. But we need to be honest with each other, Richard. No more secrets. No more lies. I nodded, even though I knew he couldn't see me. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally ready to take responsibility for my actions. I wasn't going to run anymore. I wasn't going to hide from the truth. I was going to face it head on, no matter how painful it was. I looked out the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of clarity. The past was still there, but it no longer had control over me. I was ready to move forward, ready to rebuild. And this time, I was going to do it the right way. For Charlie, for me, and for the future we were going to create together. I stood in the middle of the room, the weight of everything finally hitting me. The road I had been on had been long, with twists and turns I hadn't expected, and now, as I looked ahead, I realized how far I had come. But the journey was far from over. The phone call with David had stirred up more than I anticipated. The truth he had uncovered about the past had opened old wounds. Wounds that I hadn't fully healed from. Wounds I had thought I left behind. Now, with those wounds exposed, I had no choice but to face them. I glanced over at Charlie, who was playing with his toys on the floor, oblivious to the weight of the conversation that had just taken place. His laughter, his innocent joy, grounded me. He was why I had to do this. Why I had to fix everything. The past few months had been about rebuilding, not just my life, but our family. And as painful as the process had been, I knew it was necessary. I couldn't let the mistakes of my past define our future. But there was still so much to do. I could feel the old pressures creeping back, the expectations of success, of wealth, of the life I had once built. But it wasn't enough anymore. I had learned that the hard way. I needed something more, something real, and I wasn't going to stop until I found it. The next morning, I sat down with David to go over everything. He had been right to reach out. There were truths that we both needed to face, and now, with both of us willing to take responsibility, we could begin the process of making things right. We spent hours going over the details, the financial missteps, the lies that had been told, the decisions that had been made in the name of ambition and greed. It wasn't easy to confront, but it was necessary. We couldn't change the past, but we could control what happened from here on out. We agreed to clean up the mess, to rebuild the business with integrity and transparency. We both knew it wasn't going to be easy. There were people we had to answer to, and the damage that had been done couldn't be undone overnight. But we made a pact that day, no more running, no more hiding. We were going to fix this, together. As I hung up the phone after our final call, I felt a sense of relief. The weight of the past wasn't gone, but it had lessened. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. I wasn't going to let the mistakes of my past dictate my future. I wasn't going to let them take away the one thing that mattered most, my family. That night, after Charlie had gone to bed, I sat in the quiet of the living room, reflecting on everything that had happened. The change I had gone through was more than just about fixing a business or making amends. It was about growth, about becoming the man I had always wanted to be, the father I wanted to be. I realized now that this journey wasn't just about me. It was about Charlie. He was watching me. He was learning from me. And I wanted him to learn how to be a good man, how to own his mistakes, and how to never give up, no matter how hard life got. As the fire crackled in the hearth, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, I felt ready to face whatever came next. I knew that with each day, I was becoming the man I wanted to be, and I was becoming the father Charlie deserved. It wasn't just about cleaning up the mess I had made. It was about showing up, every day, for the people I loved. And no matter what happened, I was going to keep showing up. The next morning, I woke up early, as usual, but today felt different. I felt different. I was ready. I spent the morning in the office, working through the details of the plan David and I had made. We had a lot of work to do, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't overwhelmed by it. I was focused. I was determined. I had learned that life wasn't just about what we could achieve, but about what we could overcome. And I was ready to face the challenges ahead. Later that afternoon, Charlie and I went to the park. We played baseball together, something we hadn't done in ages. He laughed as he missed the ball for the third time. But instead of getting frustrated, I just laughed with him. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about what I had to do next or what I was missing. I was just present, just there with him. And that was enough. That evening, as I tucked Charlie into bed, I kissed him on the forehead, my heart full of love for this little boy who had taught me more than I could ever teach him. "Good night, Dad," he said sleepily, his small hand reaching for mine. "I love you." My heart swelled. "I love you too, buddy," I whispered, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. And for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. The past was behind me. The future was ahead. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready for whatever came next. I had hoped that the work I had done, the long hours spent mending the bridges I had burned, would bring me peace. But as the days passed, I realized that there was still something lurking beneath the surface. Something that I had overlooked in the chaos of everything else. I had been so focused on the business, on making things right with David, on rebuilding the life that Maya had helped me create, that I hadn't truly addressed the deeper issues I was still running from. My past, the things I had done, the people I had hurt, the lies I had told myself. All of it was still there, just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to resurface. And that moment came one afternoon, as I sat in the kitchen with Charlie, watching him eat his lunch. It was a simple moment, one of those quiet, everyday moments that we often overlook, but it was in that moment that I felt it. The weight of everything that I had ignored for so long. The things that I hadn't been willing to face. Charlie, in his innocence, was chatting away about school, about his friends, about the things that mattered to him. And yet, all I could think about was how much I had taken for granted. How much I had been running from. How much I had been hiding from. Charlie's laughter filled the room, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heart, beating faster with every passing second. The truth was, I had been afraid. Afraid of facing the man I had become. Afraid of confronting the choices I had made. And afraid of what would happen if I truly allowed myself to feel everything that had been buried inside me for so long. I had spent so much of my life controlling everything around me, creating a perfect image of who I was, of who I wanted to be. But now I realized it was time to let go of that image. It was time to face the truth. I stood up from the table, excusing myself from Charlie's innocent chatter. I needed space. I needed time to think. I walked out into the garden, where the quiet hum of the world seemed to drown out everything else. It was here, in the stillness, that I felt the weight of it all. The weight of my past, my regrets, the choices I had made, the mistakes I had to live with. I closed my eyes and let the quiet wash over me. But the quiet didn't bring the peace I had hoped for. It only brought clarity. I had spent years running from the truth, running from my own demons. And now, there was no more running. It was time to face them. I walked back inside, my mind made up. I couldn't keep hiding anymore. I had to tell Charlie. I had to face him, look him in the eyes, and show him who I really was. The man who had made mistakes, who had hurt people, who had let ambition cloud his judgment. It was time to be honest, with myself and with him. I found Charlie in the living room, watching his favorite TV show. He looked up at me as I entered, his face lighting up with that same innocent joy that always made my heart swell. But I saw something else in his eyes too. Something that told me he could feel the shift in me. The change. I walked over to him, kneeling down to his level. "Charlie," I said softly, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "There's something I need to tell you." He tilted his head, sensing the seriousness in my tone. "What's wrong, Dad?" he asked, his voice full of concern. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I've made a lot of mistakes, Charlie," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "I've hurt people, and I've hurt you by not being the father you needed me to be." Charlie didn't say anything, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. He didn't fully understand, but I could tell he was listening. "I've spent so many years chasing things that don't matter, and I've been running from the things that do." I continued, my words coming out in a rush. "But I want you to know that I'm done running. I want to be the father you deserve. I want to be the man I've always hoped I could be." Charlie reached out and put his hand on mine, his small fingers gripping mine tightly. "I know, Dad," he said quietly. "I know you're trying. His words hit me harder than anything I had expected. Here I was, thinking that I had to do everything perfectly, that I had to fix everything, but all he needed was for me to try, for me to be there, for me to be real. I've made a lot of mistakes, buddy, I said, fighting back tears. But I'm going to keep trying. I promise you that. Charlie smiled up at me, his eyes full of understanding. I know, Dad. I love you. Those 3 words were all I needed to hear. In that moment, I realized that it wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, being present, and being real. That was all Charlie needed. That was all I needed. I hugged him tightly, feeling the weight of everything I had carried for so long finally begin to lift. It wasn't gone, not completely, but it was a start. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was on the right path. I had faced my past. I had admitted my mistakes. And now, I could move forward. It was a long road ahead, but I knew that as long as I kept walking it with Charlie by my side, I would be okay. And that was enough. I could feel the weight of the past few months pressing on my chest. Every decision I had made, every change I had worked so hard for, was starting to settle in, and I was beginning to realize that the real work was just beginning. The conversations with David, the business cleanup, the long nights trying to rebuild what had been broken, all of it had led me to this moment. I had faced my past, and yet, I knew I wasn't done. I wasn't ready to stop just yet. The truth was, I still had more to prove to myself. As I walked down the hallway of the house, I felt the pull of the familiar, the comfort of knowing what I was doing. But something was missing. It wasn't until I looked into Charlie's eyes the other day, his quiet, knowing gaze as he asked about Maya, that I realized what it was. Maya's absence had left a void, not just in our lives but in me. She had been the steady force, the calm in our storm, and now, that calm was gone. And yet, her presence lingered, not in the house, but in our hearts. The lessons she had taught us, the patience, the love, the understanding, those were the things that had to remain. I had learned so much from her. But now, I was tasked with taking those lessons and living them every day. I couldn't rely on Maya's steadiness forever. I had to learn to be that for myself, for Charlie, and for the life we were building together. As I stepped outside into the garden, the familiar sound of Charlie's laughter reached my ears. He was playing with a ball, tossing it in the air, running after it with a grin so wide it was impossible not to smile back. Watching him, I was reminded of everything that was at stake, of everything I wanted to build for him. It wasn't just about fixing the past. It was about creating something better for the future. As Charlie ran toward me, his face flushed with excitement, I bent down to catch the ball he tossed to me. "Catch, Dad," he called out, his eyes sparkling with joy. I grinned and threw it back to him, relishing the pure joy in his laughter. This was the life I had been working toward, the life I had promised myself and Charlie we would have. But there was still one thing I had to do. There was still a conversation I had been putting off, a conversation that, I knew, would bring everything full circle. That evening, after dinner, I found myself sitting in the study, once again, staring at the phone in my hand. I had promised myself that I would handle everything, that I would face the past and rebuild my life. But this call was something I had been avoiding for too long. I dialed the number, my hand trembling slightly as I held the phone to my ear. It rang a few times before David picked up. "Richard." His voice came through the line, low and steady. "Yeah, it's me," I said, my throat tight. "We need to talk." There was a pause on the other end, and then David responded, his voice softening. "What's going on?" "I've been thinking." I began, my words coming slowly, as I tried to form the thoughts that had been swirling in my head for days. About everything that's happened, about what we've been through, and about Maya. There was another silence, this one longer. David didn't interrupt. "What about her?" he finally asked. "I've realized something," I said, my voice growing firmer. "I've been holding on to things, holding on to the past. I've been running from it for too long, but I can't run anymore. I need to confront the parts of myself that I've been ignoring, the parts of me that Maya helped me see. I need to own up to my mistakes, not just in business, but in how I've treated people, how I've treated those closest to me." David was quiet for a moment. "Richard, that's a big step," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of understanding and caution. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" I paused, taking a deep breath. "I'm not sure of anything, but I know that I need to start living my life with integrity. For Charlie, for myself, and for Maya." There was a long silence on the other end, and then David spoke again. "You're not alone in this," he said quietly. "I'm here. We'll get through this together." Those words hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I had believed I had to carry the weight of everything by myself. But in this moment, I realized that I didn't. I had people in my corner. I had David, I had Charlie, and I had Maya's lessons to guide me. "Thanks," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I need that. I need to know I'm not alone." "You're not," David replied. "And neither is Charlie. You're doing the right thing. Just remember, it's not about perfection. It's about progress. One step at a time." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "One step at a time," I repeated softly. I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of clarity that had been missing for so long. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I had taken the first step, and that was all I needed to do. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the night sky. The stars were bright against the dark canvas, distant but steady. In that moment, I knew that, like those stars, I too could find my way, no matter how far off the path I had strayed. I turned to find Charlie standing behind me, his face illuminated by the soft light of the room. "What are you thinking, Dad?" he asked, his voice quiet. I smiled down at him, feeling the weight of the world lift. "I'm thinking that we're going to be okay, buddy," I said. "We're going to be more than okay." Charlie smiled back, his eyes wide with trust. "I knew we would be," he said, as if the answer was simple. And in that moment, it felt like it was. Together, we could face anything, one step at a time. I woke up that morning with a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in a long time. The past few months had been full of changes, some expected, some unexpected. The work I had put into rebuilding my life, my relationship with Charlie, and even the pieces of the past I had left behind had all led me to this moment. There was a calm now, a sense of clarity that settled over me like a blanket, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was chasing something I couldn't reach. I was present. I was here, in this moment, with the people who mattered most. I got out of bed and walked to the window. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting its golden light across the quiet streets. The day felt full of promise. As I dressed and went downstairs, I saw Charlie already in the kitchen, pouring a glass of orange juice. His small figure, his innocent smile, reminded me of everything I was doing this for. I had made mistakes, yes, but I was learning, growing, and doing my best for him. It was a new chapter, and I was determined to make it one worth living. We spent the morning together, doing the simple things. We talked about his school, his friends, and how much he was looking forward to the weekend. He still asked about Maya sometimes, wondering if she would ever come back, but I had done my best to explain that she had helped us in ways that would stay with us, even if she wasn't physically there anymore. It wasn't easy for him, but he seemed to understand. As we finished breakfast, the phone rang. I looked at the caller ID and saw that it was David. It had been a while since we last spoke, and I knew this call would be important. I picked up the phone. "Hello," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Richard," David said, his voice tense. "We need to meet. There's something urgent we need to discuss." I felt a knot form in my stomach. I hadn't expected to hear from him so soon after our last conversation, but I could tell from his tone that this wasn't just about business. "What's going on?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "It's about the past," David said, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. "There's something you need to know, something that's come to light, and it could change everything." I felt my pulse quicken. "What are you talking about?" I asked, a sudden sense of dread creeping in. "Meet me in an hour. I'll explain everything then," David said before hanging up abruptly. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing. What could David possibly have uncovered now? We had already dealt with so much, tried to clean up the mess that had been made, and now he was telling me that there was something else, something worse. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to be a turning point, a moment that would either solidify everything I had worked for or bring it all crashing down. I grabbed my jacket and made my way to the door. Charlie was still in the kitchen, humming to himself as he played with his toy cars. "I'll be back in a little while, buddy," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Stay out of trouble, okay?" He looked up at me and nodded, his smile wide. "Okay, Dad. Be careful," I smiled back, ruffling his hair before stepping out the door. The drive to the meeting spot felt longer than it was, my mind racing with possibilities. What had David found? And why was he so sure it could change everything? When I arrived at the small cafe where we had agreed to meet, I spotted David sitting in a corner booth. His face was pale, his brow furrowed, and he was tapping his fingers nervously on the table. As I approached, he looked up and motioned for me to sit. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly, his eyes shifting nervously. "What's going on, David?" I asked, sitting down across from him. "What's so urgent?" David took a deep breath before speaking. "I've been doing some more digging," he began, "and I found something. Something that I'm not sure you're going to like." "Just tell me," I said, my patience thinning. David hesitated, then slid a folder across the table. "I found discrepancies in the financial records. More than we realized. It's bigger than just bad decisions, Richard. There's a deeper connection, a trail that leads back to your father." My blood ran cold. "My father," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" David nodded. I didn't want to say it, but the trail is undeniable. It's not just bad business practices. It's something more personal. Your father had a hand in some of the decisions that led to all of this. And it's more than just his involvement. It goes deeper. I stared at him, trying to process his words. My mind was reeling. My father had always been a mystery to me. The man I had looked up to. The man who had seemed to have it all together. But now, David was telling me that my father's legacy was tied to this mess. And I was left to pick up the pieces. "This is insane," I muttered, shaking my head. "I've always thought the worst of him. But this is too much." "It's not easy, Richard," David said softly. "But you need to know the truth. You need to confront it. We both do." I took a deep breath, the weight of what David had just revealed settling in. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to face my father's mistakes, to confront the legacy that had haunted me for so long. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't back down now. Not when I had come this far. Not when everything I had worked for, everything I had fought to rebuild, was at stake. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice steady but full of determination. "We clean up the mess," David replied. "We fix what's broken. And we take responsibility. For everything." I drove home with a heavy heart, my thoughts swirling in a storm of confusion and realization. David's revelation about my father had shaken me to my core. I had spent so many years wondering about the man I had once idolized, trying to piece together the puzzle of our fractured relationship. But now, with the truth finally surfacing, I didn't know what to do with it. The fact that my father had been involved in the very mess I was now trying to clean up was something I couldn't just ignore. I had been running from the shadows of my past for so long, but now they were right in front of me, forcing me to confront them head-on. I needed answers. I needed to know the full story of what had happened, how my father's decisions had led to the chaos I was now cleaning up. But more than that, I needed to understand how it had all come to this. I couldn't move forward until I did. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Charlie playing in the yard, his laughter echoing in the air. For a moment, everything seemed normal again. His innocence, his joy, reminded me of why I had to keep fighting, why I couldn't let the past destroy the future I was trying to build with him. I took a deep breath and walked inside, trying to steady my nerves. Charlie looked up as I entered, his face lighting up. "Dad, can we play a game after dinner?" he asked, his eyes bright with excitement. I smiled at him, trying to push the weight of the conversation with David aside, if only for a moment. "Of course, buddy," I replied, ruffling his hair. "We'll play after dinner, I promise." As we sat down for dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. The weight of the conversation with David was still pressing on me, and I knew that I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine. I had to face it. I had to face the truth about my father, about myself, and about the choices I had made. After dinner, Charlie went to bed, his energy spent from a day full of play. I found myself alone in the living room, the silence pressing in on me. I looked around the room, at the life I had built, at the memories I had created with Charlie, and I realized how much I had to lose. I couldn't let my father's mistakes ruin everything I had worked for. But I also knew that I couldn't keep running from the truth. It was time to confront it. The phone call with David had been a wake-up call. I needed to face the consequences of my past, to make sure that I was doing everything I could to make things right, not just for me, but for Charlie as well. I couldn't keep pretending that I had it all figured out. I had to confront the mess I had made, the legacy I had inherited. I stood up, walking over to the window and looking out at the city lights in the distance. I couldn't change the past, but I could change how I moved forward. I could be the man I wanted to be, the father Charlie needed. I could make the right choices from here on out. And that meant facing the truth, no matter how painful it was. The next morning, I went to the office early, determined to face whatever was coming. I had arranged a meeting with David and some of the key people involved in the business, and I knew that it was time to put everything on the table. No more secrets. No more lies. As I sat at the conference table, the familiar faces of the people I had worked with for years looked back at me, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. They knew something was different. They knew that things had changed. I cleared my throat, my hands resting on the table in front of me. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but filled with purpose. "We need to be honest with each other about what's been going on, about the mistakes we've made, and about how we're going to move forward from here." The room fell silent, the weight of my words settling in. I could see the tension in the air, the unease in their eyes. But I didn't care. I had spent too long running from the truth, from the consequences of my actions. It was time to own up to everything. There are things we've hidden, things we've tried to cover up, and it's time for us to fix them, I continued. We need to rebuild this business, but we also need to rebuild the trust we've lost. And that starts with being honest, with each other and with ourselves. I could feel the tension in the room begin to lift as I spoke. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I knew that it wouldn't be easy to rebuild what had been broken, but it was the only way forward. "I'm ready to take responsibility for my part in this," I said, my voice strong. "And I expect each of you to do the same. If we're going to fix this, we have to do it together. No more running from the truth." The meeting lasted for hours, and by the time it ended, I felt a sense of relief. The hard part was over. We had laid everything out on the table, and now we could move forward. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I also knew that I was ready to face them. I wasn't the same man I had been when this all started. I was stronger. I was more determined. And I was finally ready to do the right thing. As I left the office, the weight of the past didn't feel quite so heavy anymore. It wasn't gone, but it was lighter. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally on the right path. I had faced the truth, and now, it was time to move forward, with Charlie by my side and the lessons I had learned to guide me. I sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Charlie was inside, already tucked into bed after another day filled with laughter and games. I had spent so much time trying to fix the broken pieces of my life that I had forgotten how beautiful the simple moments were. The quiet evenings, the sound of Charlie's laughter, the warmth of home. These were the things that mattered most. These were the things I had almost lost. And now, as I sat here, I realized that it wasn't just about fixing the past. It was about embracing the future fully and completely. I had made mistakes. We all had. But the important thing was that I had faced them, learned from them, and was moving forward. I had learned how to be a better father, a better man, and I was no longer afraid to be vulnerable. I had learned to lean on the people I loved, to accept help when I needed it, and to give help when others needed me. And most importantly, I had learned that no matter how dark the past may seem, there was always a way to move toward the light. My phone buzzed on the table beside me, breaking my thoughts. I glanced at the screen and saw a message from David. "We did it," it read. "We've made it right." I smiled, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. The business was finally on track, the mistakes had been addressed, and the lessons we had learned were guiding us all forward. There was still work to be done, but I knew that we were on the right path. I felt like I could finally breathe again. For the first time in years, I felt free. I had carried the weight of the past for so long, but now I was ready to let it go. I was ready to live. As I sat there, I thought about Maya. She had come into our lives at a time when we needed her most, when everything seemed impossible. And even though she was no longer with us physically, her presence was still felt in every part of our lives. The lessons she taught us, the love she gave, the way she helped us heal, those things would stay with us forever. I didn't know where life would take me next, but I knew that I had everything I needed right here. Charlie, our home, the lessons I had learned, they were all I needed to move forward. I stood up, stretching my legs as I walked inside. Charlie was asleep, his small chest rising and falling gently with each breath. I stood in the doorway, watching him for a moment. He was safe now, protected and loved. And that was all that mattered. I kissed him gently on the forehead and whispered, "I love you, buddy." before turning off the light and heading downstairs. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with memories, with love, and with the promise of tomorrow. I sat down at the kitchen table, taking a deep breath as I looked around. It wasn't just a house, it was a home. And for the first time, I felt like I belonged here. The man I had been was gone, and the man I was becoming was finally starting to show up. A better man, a better father, a better person. I knew there would be challenges ahead, and I knew that I would stumble sometimes. But I was ready. I had learned what it meant to truly live, to be present, to love without reservation, and to accept that I wasn't perfect. I didn't need to be. I just needed to keep trying, keep moving forward, and keep doing the best I could. I wasn't alone anymore. I had Charlie. I had the lessons I had learned, and I had a future that was brighter than I ever imagined. And that, I realized, was all I needed to be content. With that thought, I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the stars that dotted the night sky. It was peaceful, calm, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace with myself. This was the beginning of something new. A life full of possibilities, a life built on love, trust, and the understanding that no matter what happens, we have the strength to face it together. And for the first time in years, I felt ready for whatever came next. This captivating story unfolds with a powerful journey of growth, redemption, and the lessons learned along the way. Follow the protagonist as he faces his past mistakes and works to rebuild his life, while learning what it truly means to be a father and a man. As he navigates the complexities of his personal and professional life, the importance of love, family, and confronting the truth comes to the forefront. Through unexpected twists and challenges, the story mirrors the themes commonly found in Black stories, where overcoming adversity and finding one's true self is central to the narrative. This tale touches on the deep, often untold emotions that make Black stories resonate with so many, showing that no matter how broken life may seem, redemption is always possible. As the protagonist grapples with the impact of his past decisions, he finds hope and healing through his relationship with his son, embodying the themes of second chances and personal growth that are prevalent in many Black stories. By the end, this inspiring journey demonstrates that true strength comes from within, and it is the bonds we create that truly define our future. Like many Black stories, this one teaches us that embracing our vulnerabilities and acknowledging our mistakes leads to greater wisdom and stronger connections with those we love.